One day when our dogs were still puppies, my little baby Dolly started acting strangely. She retreated to the laundry room and she growled whenever the other dogs came near. I let her be, thinking maybe she wasn't feeling well, but I had to intervene when her sister Mia went back there and started barking her head off. "Out!" I shouted, pointing a menacing finger at the loudmouth. Mia stood her ground, and little Dolly, the smaller of the two, lunged at her sister with bared teeth. Then I noticed the reason for the ruckus. There was a new bag of dog food sitting on the floor, and little Dolly was guarding it, keeping everyone away, even her sister, especially her sister. Poor Mia had recognized the injustice of it and spoken up, even though she knew she wasn't supposed to bark like that. She knew she could be scolded, but she had to tell me that Dolly was doing the wrong thing. Mia's always been big on rules, especially as they apply to others. She gets scolded quite often for being too loud, but when she sees what she perceives as an injustice, she will not keep silent. So this little doggy drama happened to be unfolding as I was reading the 62nd chapter of the book of the prophet Isaiah, which starts out like this: "For Zion's sake, I will not keep silent, and for Jerusalem's sake, I will not rest, until her vindication shines out like the dawn and her salvation like a burning torch." So great was the prophet Isaiah's love for his people and his commitment to their vindication and salvation from injustice that he would not keep silent. No matter the risk, he would continue speaking out. Even though prophets are generally killed for that sort of thing, Isaiah speaks boldly, saying, "I will not keep silent." I do not know how Isaiah might have felt about dogs, but I think he could have appreciated our Mia, who has the heart of a prophet. In the face of blatant injustice, the hoarding of food, she articulated her concern, even knowing that she might be scolded by me or pounced on by her bratty sister, both of which things did happen. But had she said nothing, Dolly would have stayed there all day long, maybe longer, until finally I would have poured the food into the bin and taken the huge bag away. In the meantime, no one was allowed in, not even for a drink of water. And that is not how we run things in our household. Knowing this, Mia simply could not keep silent. You see, that is the job of a prophet, to speak up for how things are run in God's household, and to speak out when things are not being done that way. Isaiah was a prophet who was so outspoken that an entire biblical book is named for him, even the parts he didn't write. But we can hear the voices of other prophets in the context of biblical stories as well. Today's lesson comes to us from the Gospel of John, and I would invite you to listen closely for the voice of a prophet speaking up so that God's will might be revealed, even though it was risky to do so. This story comes from the 2nd chapter of John, just a couple days after Jesus has called his first disciples to follow him. Now on the 3rd day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now, standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each jar holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them up to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called for the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk, but you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs, in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Did you hear the prophet? John doesn't name her, but we know her name from the neighboring Gospel of Luke. She is called Mary, Jesus' mother. And while her role in the story is a bit overshadowed by the miracle of the wine, that miracle only happened because Mary would not keep silent, even when her own son tried to shush her up. I don't know why she would not keep silent. Maybe she was feeling the warm flush of too much wine, or a hopeful optimism inspired by seeing everyone together, eating and drinking and laughing. Maybe the wine and the merriment had helped her forget for just 1 minute that once the gift of her son was offered to the world, it would all be taken from her. Or maybe she spoke up, fully aware and resolute she had kept him long enough, and these people, her people, hungered and thirsted, literally, for God's love and abundance to be made known to them. Here was such poverty that even at a wedding feast, they couldn't manage to keep the wine flowing. While elsewhere, at finer tables, the wealthy became fat and drunk on the abundance harvested by these people whose cups and plates were empty. Did Mary whisper a prayer before she spoke out? Maybe she recited the words of Psalm 36, verses 7 through 10. How precious is your steadfast love, O God. All people may take refuge in the shadow of your wings. They feast on the abundance of your house, and you give them drink from the river of your delights. For with you is the fountain of life. In your light we see light. O continue your steadfast love to those who know you, and your salvation to the upright of heart. I can imagine Mary praying this way, summoning the courage of God's steadfast love before speaking the words that would send her son headfirst into the destiny that would pierce his beautiful body and her upright heart. No matter what it cost Mary, she would not be silent. Much attention is given to the sacrifice Jesus made, rightly so, but what of Mary? She too made a sacrifice. From this moment on, she will not appear again, not in John's gospel, not until the crucifixion, where her cup will be filled to overflowing with tears. What if she had said nothing that night in Cana? It must have been tempting, but somehow she followed her prophetic calling. I will not keep silent. In bold defiance of all who lived by the mantra of scarcity, Mary's voice prepared the way for a new guiding word, abundance. While the other guests were looking despairingly into their empty wine glasses, Mary pointed to Jesus, telling the servers, "Do whatever he tells you." For he would show them all the way to abundance, pouring out the finest blessings into their waiting cups, filling them to overflowing with a ridiculous quantity of wine, just gallons of the stuff, way more than they could possibly need and better quality than they ever dreamed of. Because once you let God do something wonderful for you, God just doesn't know how to stop. And it isn't just wine, is it? Time and time again, Jesus would show people how to experience the abundance of God, gathering the hungry and asking who among them had any food at all. Somehow all were fed with leftovers. Or having the fishing crew try things in an unconventional way, they would net more fish than they could haul in without tearing their nets. Blessing upon blessing, for ours is a God who delights when all of us share in the abundance. It turns out that scarcity is an illusion, a myth perpetrated by those afraid to share. When we act out of love, seeing the belovedness of everyone in the community, sharing becomes the norm and we discover the truth. We do not have a problem of scarcity. We have a problem of equitable distribution. There is enough and there will be enough, because that is God's way. And if we follow Mary's advice and do whatever Jesus tells us to do, all people will know it. I give thanks to Mary and other prophetic voices that to this day challenge our human fear of scarcity and proclaim instead the delight of abundance. And let us be clear, delighting in abundance in God's terms does not mean that some people get to enjoy having too much, but that all people should partake in what God has provided for our collective sustenance. Like the psalm we just heard, all people may take refuge in the shadow of your wings. They feast in the abundance of your house. But this is a countercultural notion in direct opposition with the systems of the world which promote excess abundance for very few and scarcity for many. To proclaim a different way means to challenge the very systems that we have been taught to uphold. It's risky to speak out against what just is it not? Prophets have been killed for this very thing, for daring to suggest that there is a better way in which all should partake in the abundance that our God meant for us to share. How tightly we cling when we believe there can never be enough for all. And that thinking extends beyond our nutritive and material assets to include more esoteric concerns, such as rights. There are those who seem to believe that more rights for some mean fewer rights for others. This thinking has led to strong, even violent pushback against those who would advocate for the equitable treatment of women, of people of color, of the disabled, of the socioeconomically disadvantaged, of Indigenous persons, of the LGBTQIA+ community, of guest workers and climate refugees, of anyone who asks simply for access to the same benefits and blessings enjoyed by others in the human family. Tomorrow we shall honor the great hero of the civil rights movement, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who received what Jesus called the prophet's reward for his refusal to keep silent. As a true follower of Jesus, he followed Mary's advice and did what Jesus said, advocating for a more Christ-like world in which all people should be considered equal and given access to what they need for thriving. Like Jesus, he led a bold new movement for justice. Like Jesus, he knew the price he would pay. But like Jesus, witnessing his people's suffering, he could not keep silent. It would have been easier for King to keep silent, would have been easier for Jesus to keep silent. It would have been easier for Mary to keep silent. But instead, they started difficult conversations about what it means to live in God's will, what it means to be part of a community that not only survives but thrives. And we who are followers of Jesus are meant to do the work of building communities that thrive. In fact, thriving in community is part of our conference's vision statement, and we will focus on that this year. What does it mean to thrive in community, and how can we, the church, help? This should be our guiding question throughout this year, and I encourage you to ponder it frequently. My hope is that we can engage in some deep conversations about what we can do to help our greater community thrive. I do not expect these to be easy conversations with simple solutions. If that were so, Christians would have figured this out about 2,000 years ago. It turns out that our conversations are not over, that there are things that need to be talked about, even if they make us feel uncomfortable. I imagine that Jesus felt uncomfortable from time to time, which is why he insistently brought up uncomfortable topics in his teachings. I don't know about you, but I am never very comfortable for long whenever I read the Gospels. Those lessons pack a punch. Good news they do proclaim, but it is a kind of good news that doesn't tiptoe around trying to make me feel good. Jesus knew that, and yet he risked everything to tell it. He would not keep silent. I do thank God for those who refuse to keep silent, who continue paving the way of abundant life for all by speaking out. Today we celebrate those brave souls who, like Jesus and like his mother Mary, have decided that they will not keep silent, who have risked great pain and loss in order to advocate for a more godly way of thinking, that there is enough, more than enough, and it is God's great delight that we share it. I would like to think that we still listen to those voices and that we will become increasingly curious about hearing new voices, even the ones that disrupt our routines a bit. The voices of poets and philosophers and scientists and historians and children not quite grown, and the earth itself, who is also trying to get our attention any way she can. What might we learn if we listened to the voices that will not keep